Hi everyone, and welcome to Empowering Homeschool Conversations. My name is Peggy Ployer, and I am the founder and CEO, as well as the host of this broadcast, Empowering Homeschool Conversations. We at SPED Homeschool empower families to home educate children with learning challenges, and I encourage you to check out our website at spedhomeschool.com to learn more about the resources and the support that we offer families. So today we are actually wrapping up a monthly theme. Every month we focus on a different theme, and this month we've been focusing on school choice, but maybe from some different perspectives that you haven't thought about school choice, and really some ways that school choice can affect and enhance how you teach a struggling learner. And I'm excited today to have my guest, Alona Cortes. Welcome, Alona, and thank you for joining us to talk about freedom and flexibility in homeschool scheduling.
Thank you, Peggy. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited because a lot of times when we think about school choice and freedom and flexibility, we just think we have the freedom to choose the school. A lot of times we don't think about the freedom to choose what we do when we make that choice as well. And so I was talking with Alona, I think we met maybe like 3 weeks ago, and she started talking about how much the schedule and flexibility within the schedule of homeschooling can really help a struggling learner. And I thought we've got to talk about this on our show. So I'm so super excited to have you here today and to talk about this, because I know it's something you're passionate about. But I would just love for you to start out by telling us a little bit about you and your homeschooling story and what you're working on to help homeschoolers with struggling learners, especially in this area of scheduling and helping parents.
All right. So I am a mother of 3. My kids are 6, 8, and 10, almost 11, as my oldest will definitely tell you, which is very important. And I started homeschooling when my oldest was in kindergarten, but it wasn't really always the plan. I grew up going to public school, and I loved it, and I did well in public school, and I enjoyed it so much that I wanted to be a teacher, so I would never have to leave school. And then I grew up and I started my teacher education program and started doing some like field experience and seeing more of the behind the scenes stuff that as a kid you don't see that.
Right.
You just see your teacher teaching the class, and you know everyone has to listen to her. Like, it's great, and and everyone's learning, you know. So, or at least from my perspective as a kid, everyone was learning. And then you grow up and you're like, wait, not everyone learns the same way, and you know, not everyone enjoys school. Not everyone's experience with school is positive. And I started doing my student teaching, and the teacher I was working with, it was the first couple weeks of school, and there was one student she just did not like. And this was first grade, like little 6-year-olds, like my youngest is 6. And she's so sensitive, and I can see like where kids that age, they're so sensitive to the attitude someone has towards them, even when it's subtle.
Right.
But I remember this teacher, there was an incident where a child had gotten in trouble in the hallways, and the janitor had thought that it was this boy that she doesn't like. And so they like talked about it and stuff, and afterwards it came out that it wasn't him, it was some other kid that was getting in trouble, and she had said she had hoped that it was him so that he would be punished. And I thought, how sad. And since it was the beginning of the year too, it's not like this kid had
the child was set up to fail from the beginning.
And they did this little activity where one of the questions they said, what's one thing you want your teacher to know about you? And he said that he wrote, that I am good.
Oh.
And I was like, how sad, this poor child. And he was a hardworking kid. He always like finished his schoolwork, and he would get, his issue was maybe he would get bored, and he wasn't redirected appropriately. And that was, at that time, my oldest was 3, and my youngest wasn't even born yet. And my middle child was just turning 1, and I thought, I can't send my kids to a school where they're going to be treated like that just because a previous teacher said they were a problem child.
Right.
And especially when your child is 3, that's when a lot of problems start to show up. So
right. Exactly.
Like, okay, she might have some issues with behavior later on, and you don't know at that time, is it a phase? Are they going to grow out of it? Are you going to figure it out?
Yeah.
So I decided then, but when my oldest daughter turned 5, I was in the middle of getting a divorce, and their biological father is no longer around them anymore. And it was so hard trying to take care of these 3 very small children. So I was thinking, I'll send my oldest to school. It'll lighten my load during the day, and she will get the education that she needs. But I knew she had some difficulties already because I had been doing like preschool and that kind of stuff with her. And she caught on to some things, but her language still, she was struggling a lot with her language. So I go to orientation, tell the teacher, look, you have to look right at her when you're talking to her. She doesn't do well with background noise and things like that. And the teacher goes, okay, yeah, we'll deal with it. 6 weeks into the school year, nothing had been addressed, and she was falling behind very quickly. And it was full day kindergarten. And for a kid who had never been in preschool or daycare,
huge.
So, I mean, the first day she went to school, she came home, she got off the bus, and she said, Mommy, I missed you all day. I promise I'm never going to school again. And I was like, actually, you're going again tomorrow. But she, people say she'll adjust, she'll get used to it. Even after 6 weeks, she still was miserable. She hated it. She was getting in trouble at school because she talked to the kids next to her. She's very sociable. She loves other kids. Or, well, now we're facing preteens, so that's questionable. But at 5, she loved being around other kids. And, to see her feeling discouraged and like she's getting in trouble, she wasn't picking up on the material and things like that. So I just went up to the school and I said, I'm withdrawing her. And they're like, whoa, why? What's going on? What happened? And I said, I just want to homeschool her. That's it. You don't have to give a reason when you decide to. If it's not working for your child, that's enough of a reason. Or even it could be working for your child, and you just feel a conviction, or you just personally want to do it.
I love that you point that out. Yes, exactly. And go with that gut feeling, because it's amazing where that will take you. Well, that's an awesome story. Natalie is watching on Facebook, and she says, hello, ladies. Hi, Natalie. Thanks for joining us. And if you are joining us on Facebook or YouTube, we're broadcasting live on both of those. We would love to have you part of our conversation, so feel free to put comments in the feed on either place, and we'll see them. We'd like to incorporate them in with our with what we're talking about. But I'm going to bring up your slides, Alona, and kind of the end of my question, I'd love for you to talk about this Pillars of Peace Primary Partners, which is at the very beginning of your slides, as to what you're working on right now for homeschoolers.
Yeah, so I started homeschooling my daughter, and I had always had a very positive view of homeschooled kids and families. And I just always had this idea that homeschooled kids always excel at everything. And that wasn't the case for us. It was a huge struggle. And we, even with my teaching background, like I had done all the coursework and stuff I didn't have my certification yet, but I had a lot of background in education. And even in high school, I took electives like childhood development and anything like that. So since I was a kid, that's been my focus. Like, how do people learn?
Right.
Even I took classes on sorry, excuse me.
That's okay.
A little bit of a cough here. I took classes on like dyslexia and
so you had a lot of previous interest in a lot of those things, which kind of pointed you in that direction too. I'm gonna put up a comment here, and we have another viewer from watching on YouTube. Pug Life says hi from Portland, Maine. Thanks for watching us. I'm coming from Florida this week. Normally I broadcast from Houston, Texas, but as you can see, I'm in my RV right now, broadcasting from Jacksonville Beach. So we're kind of all over the place. But all right. So hopefully your cough is mitigated now, and we'll continue on.
So we found ourselves struggling a lot with the homeschooling, and I ended up getting my master's degree in special education because of how much my own children were struggling. And I realized that we weren't the only family dealing with that kind of issue. Where actually, on the contrary, a lot of people were pulling their kids out because the school system wasn't working for them and their children's special needs.
Yeah.
So what would happen, from what I would see with other parents, they would pull their kids out, they would try to homeschool them, and they would become very, very frustrated and very discouraged because their kids are struggling. And that's a challenge even for professional teachers.
Exactly. That is so good to point out, because I think we as parents beat ourselves up way too much about that.
Yeah, and I know that was something that I felt a lot of guilt for. Like, why isn't my child on grade level? Why isn't my child learning how to read? And it turned out, like, I knew she had a variety of issues with dyslexia, auditory processing, visual tracking. And then we also found out that my older two had some retained primitive reflexes. Actually, all their primitive reflexes were retained, which I didn't even know was a thing. I had never heard of it.
You'll find a lot of that on our website if you want to find out more about all those things. But yes, I didn't know that when I first started homeschooling 19 years ago.
Yeah, it's just not something people really talk about, and it's shocking because of how profoundly it can affect a child, especially when you see things like attention issues, which is something my middle daughter struggles with a lot, with the attention. Because I thought with my middle daughter, she doesn't have the same language difficulties that my oldest has. So I thought teaching her how to read is going to be a breeze. And it wasn't. Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm
you know what? That we do that way too often. We just go, well, if it's not the kids, it's got to be me. And what a mistake that is. Because yes, our kids each have different struggles, and sometimes it is us, but it's not all us.
So we had someone at our church actually say that their son, who's close to my oldest's age, he was struggling with attention, learning, tantrums, just behavioral problems, all kinds of issues.
Right.
And they had discovered this primitive reflex issue. So I went and got my older two tested, and it came back that they had retained all of them, but the treatment was very expensive. And I was like, there's no way we can afford this. Not only that, but the time. You had to go out there 3 times a week, and the location was an hour away from us.
Oh, and wow. That's so much time.
Yes. Yeah, and you figure I'm homeschooling my 3 kids who take forever to do their schoolwork, and I'm also working full time. So,
yeah.
I just couldn't see how it would be possible to do that. So I'm very much a do-it-yourself kind of person. Like, if I can't afford it or whatever, I'll just go and learn how to do it myself. So
I'm glad you're highlighting this side, because this is a lot of where parents come from when they start looking at homeschool schedules, and they look at how inflexible they are, because they're looking at all these options of, well, I have to go to this therapy and I have to do this there, and they find themselves running around all the time and thinking, this isn't flexible at all, or I'm trying to make it as flexible as I can, but I have to fit in all these things. And I'm so glad that we're going to kind of move beyond this. But it's great for you to point out where you started at too, because there is an ability to change this.
So with working full time and everything, like, you can't. It's not your traditional school day. So.
Exactly. Yes.
Especially trying to get in all this other stuff. So we started doing the exercises at home. Like, I bought a book, Diane Craft's book. I know you'd mentioned that you'd worked with her.
Yep, Diane has been a mentor of mine since I started homeschooling. So yes, she is an amazing woman.
So we looked into the book, we started doing the exercises, but I also got them enrolled in occupational therapy, because one, kids just work harder for somebody else.
They do, yes, and that's good to point out.
That's a struggle as a homeschooling parent. You'll see, like, your kids will go to co-op and suddenly they can read when they're there, and they sit down.
Right.
They're like, what's happening? So it's good. They go to that once a week, but that wouldn't have been enough by itself. So we do the exercises at home, and even after like a month, the therapists are like, wow, they're making really great progress, So it's nice also to have that third party to say, hey, they are making progress. And it motivates the kids as well. So with Pillars of Peace, we're trying to integrate those two things where, one, you have that third party, someone else telling your kid, yes, you do actually have to do your schoolwork.
Right. They back up mom and dad and say, yep, we agree with them.
And also to help with the consistency of doing those exercises, because it's so easy to just be like, you know what, I'm tired. We have a goal. We are busy. And even though the exercises don't really take a long time out of your day, it's just the starting.
It is. I remember when we started doing that, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, switching tracks. For someone like myself who does have autism as well as my kids, switching tracks is difficult from every perspective in our family. And so I didn't want to switch tracks. I didn't. But when we have it with somebody else that we're accountable to, it happens more often. And I totally agree with that. Yeah. So I'm excited about, this program that you're pulling together, because and as I was telling Alona when she introduced it to me, I'm like, this is filling a need that we have had for a long time in our community.
Yeah.
So I'm super excited. Yeah. So we have some comments I want to catch up on before we dive into our slides, but we have Francesca is watching from San Diego, And Pug Life just wanted to thank you, Alona, for sharing your real mom story. It was very helpful. And Samuel, I guessing that's your husband. He says, "You go, Alona." And then there was a backup, says, "Nice to see a homeschool dad on." And then Francesca also noted, she said, "My biggest homeschool struggle is organization since I have an ADHD diagnosis." We talked about this. As parents, we oftentimes, most of the time, have the same diagnoses as our kids. And that makes homeschooling difficult, but it doesn't make it impossible. But she says, "But thanks to great resources like this channel, my 9-year-old son with an autism diagnosis is doing great." That is so awesome to hear. I'm so excited that we can come by you and alongside you and help. And yes, I have amazing guests. I learn every week, and I learn not to beat myself up for the things that I'm learning that I didn't do when I was homeschooling my own kids. It's the way it is. But I'm glad they're here for you guys. So yeah, should we dive into the slides?
Yeah.
Okay, let me see if I can find them again. All right, so we were going to focus on tips and advice for planning. And I think I'm going to run by my questions here a little bit for you. But I know we oftentimes, when families look at homeschooling, they ask other homeschoolers, what their homeschooling schedule looks like. And I mean, would you recommend that approach? Why or why not? And what additionally would you suggest they do to start figuring out a good schedule for their family?
I think that it's probably almost inevitable that you're going to want to ask other people what they do.
Yeah.
And for me, asking, like, if you're going to ask a variety of people.
That is a very good point. Yeah.
So, because ultimately it doesn't really matter what other people are doing. You don't need to base what you're doing off of what others are doing. But seeing the multiple perspectives can give you some, when you're just starting, especially for someone, people like me that went to a public school or their only experience is like a traditional school day.
Right.
Or even worse, if you have a teaching degree and you really think that it needs to be like that.
Right.
You just have to remember, like, the reason public and even private schools are set up the way they are is because they have so many kids all the same age, and the expectation is that they're all going to be working on the same thing.
Right.
And that's part of why we homeschool, is because we don't think that works.
Right.
So we shouldn't model what we're doing after what we're already feeling like isn't working. The best for
exactly. Yeah, that's a great point to make. Awesome. Should I head to the next slide?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So one of the things that, this is kind of like an overview of kind of the points that I thought of when it came to making a schedule.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So you can ask around and see what some other people are doing, just to kind of see, because maybe they have an idea that you didn't think of.
Right.
And what I would recommend is trying to do a routine more than a schedule, especially.
Oh, I love that. I love that flip. Exactly.
So, especially for kids that have learning challenges, a rigid schedule can be very difficult. And parents who have their own hang-ups and stuff like that, they might have their own attention issues or their own difficulties with organizing or anything like that. So a routine can help you to know what's going to come next.
Yes.
But versus a schedule where it feels very rigid.
Right, because there's certain time segments that you have to be done by a certain time and start by a certain time, and your anxiety level just shoots to the right. At least mine does. When I have time periods and I can't keep them.
Oh yeah. I know someone had recommended us having like a schedule at one point, and I tried it, and I just felt like a failure every day because I couldn't keep it. It was not there's always something that's going to come up. So I have more on each slide, but also a multidisciplinary approach where we kind of combine different subjects together, which helps you get things done faster.
We found that highly successful with my kids.
And I think they learn better that way. It's more realistic. It's not like in life things are separated like that. It's not and prioritizing, keeping things that are the top priority first, get those done first, but don't over plan things. So
that's a good point. Yes.
I've been, as a teacher, you're told over plan. Because
really?
You don't want a class.
Oh, you don't want empty spots. Got it.
You don't want your class, because it's a behavior management thing.
It is.
You don't have that at home though. Like, at home you have other behavior management things that you can do, where what I do when I'm thinking straight, what I do is when they don't have a specific task that they need to do, to prevent them from just like, they like to run around. They like a horse or a lion or a dog or whatever. And all the games, they look the same to me. It's just them running up and down the hallway yelling.
Right. Oh yes, I remember the days. Yes.
So to give them something constructive to do during that time where maybe you have things you need to get done, like that they can't. It's best if they can help with things, like if you're cleaning the house, they can help, even little kids. But I work from home full time. They can't help me with that.
Right. Yeah.
So and my husband also works from home too. So we're both here, but we're not always able to be doing something with them, and that's fine, because they don't always need something done with them.
Right. They don't need to be entertained.
We're not clowns. Our job's not to entertain them. But they should have some direction on what is appropriate. So we have different things that we kind of default to. They're allowed to color. They're allowed to read, or if they can't read yet, they can look at books. They still enjoy looking at the pictures. They are now old enough they can play some simple board games or card games together, which is great. We have one, maybe my husband remembers the name of it. It's this little treasure game, but it's really cool because it's like you're playing against the game. So you're not competing against each other. So no hurt feelings.
Right, you're less likely to have a battle ensue when you can't mitigate the.
So that they've been loving that game, or even a cat found her way. So anyways, she sorry, I lost my train of thought. Anyways, they can do certain activities like independently.
Yes.
And you don't have necessarily that flexibility in a classroom. So that's why you overplan for a classroom, or make it a co-op class or something like that. At home, you underplan, because if you are finished early, then great. You probably won't finish early.
Right. Yes.
Especially if you have a struggling learner. You don't want to rush them. I know
so true. Yes, I love you point out.
My middle daughter just clams up, and she cannot function. They're rushing her. My youngest, we were in a co-op class. It's a Play-Doh art class. They had to build a garden with their Play-Doh. There was a time limit because it's a co-op class. My youngest daughter, she was just like, I can't. Like, she's like, I don't know how. I'm like, what do you mean you don't know how to play with Play-Doh all of a sudden? Because there was a time limit on it, and she just it wasn't fun to her anymore. So I'll just not mention the time limit. So, but because you can have it in your mind, but I'm not.
Right.
So. And then also taking breaks is a huge thing, because it's so tempting, especially because things probably took longer. than you wanted them to.
Oh yeah,
you know,
exactly.
it's tempting to just try to move on to the next thing, but it's kind of like when you exercise, they say that rest time is just as important as the time you spend exercising, because you need time for that muscle to heal. It's the same with our brains. So
Yeah, I can see that. That makes a lot. Yeah, I learned too with the prioritizing part that sometimes when life crises happen, that if I had prioritized what things need to get done the most, I could quickly grab those three top things and say everything else gets shoved to the side. This is what we have to get done today. The rest is just going to float until we can get around to it. So, next month we're going to be talking about illnesses and medical issues and homeschooling through those types of things. That's where those top three are just so important to always know, prioritize it.
And your priorities might look different than another family's.
Exactly. That's a great point too. Yep. So don't always ask your neighbor, what are your three top priorities? Because as a parent, I know what three things are most important in my house to be taught. Yes. And it's gonna be different from house to house.
And even as they get older.
Exactly. So. Yes. Yep. True. Anyway. All right. Well, let's move on to the next slide, I guess. Okay. So that was, we're going to go more in depth with routine and schedule. Awesome. Okay.
So one thing you can do is consider planning in chunks or blocks rather than subjects. So you can say, like, for me, I know how my work day looks, and there are certain times of the day where I have meetings or I have lessons I have to teach for work. So I'll say there's a chunk of time before I have to start working, and then I have a little chunk of time like where maybe my lunch break or something is, and then I have a chunk of time after. And on each day that could be different because there's one day a week, sometimes two, they have their therapy. There's Fridays, they have co-op. And so it's different each day, but which chunks are available for us. But we know through the week, my kids know pretty much by now what we're doing, like the order of things for each day. For instance, I'll usually start with language arts or math because it just depends on how long I have. My kids get done their math faster. So if I have a shorter amount of time, I might have them do their math. But they also are more able to do math a little more independently. So sometimes I'll save that for another time of the day where maybe I'm going to be doing other things and like maybe multitasking. So that's one way, rather than saying, okay, we have to do reading at 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock every day. Like, it may not work that way. That might not work for you.
Right, exactly.
We tried that before, and it did not work. It was too stressful.
Well, that's good. It's good to know that there are some trial and error in this process, and you're going to learn, and you're just going to tweak and change as things work and things don't work, and that's okay.
Yeah, so there's definitely going to be trial and error, and also it's going to change as they get older, because little kids are going to need a lot more hand-holding through their schoolwork.
Yep.
But once they get up to where they are a little bit more independent, and I always encourage to teach that independence at a young age, which I get into a little bit later. But so it's going to look different when they're in early elementary versus when they're in high school. Because what they're learning is different. Like when they're in high school, you're probably not going over spelling words anymore.
Right.
I mean,
some people might be, but yes,
a lot of people, they've shifted to something else, and now maybe they this is where they're able to focus more on like history and things like that. Whereas when they're little, if you can at least get them their foundation in their reading and writing and their basic math, that's your priority as like little kids. Whereas some people nowadays, you have teenagers and toddlers in the same house, and trying to balance them, and it can be a little bit more challenging to try to meet all their needs. So
not impossible, but it is challenging.
Definitely not impossible. And there's pros and cons to that too, because like you have more diverse needs, but sometimes the older kids can help the younger kids.
Exactly.
That can be beneficial for everybody. So as long as you don't like overdo it, like they're not the parent, but they can sit with them through a simple lesson or something.
Utilize that to make it beneficial for both students.
So, and you do that in the classroom too, where you have the more advanced learners working with the ones that are struggling a little bit more. It just depends on your personal dynamic in your own house. So we have some benefits of being flexible. One is avoiding burnout, because that's probably the biggest one.
Well, and especially if you're a person who likes, to have something new, every once in a while, and you really do not thrive on being always doing the same thing. I'm one of those people. And so if I saw like my whole schedule all week was the same, I'd go, oh. But yeah, you can kind of change it up a little bit. And again, it's that little bit. Everything doesn't have to change. The routine can stay the same, but maybe there's a pop of something new every day, just enough to keep the burnout from happening.
I have found that for us, although we have kind of like our weekly flow and routine, there's holidays, there's summer break. There's always something that's interrupting it. So we don't really get tired of it, because by the time we really are getting used to it, we're thrown out of it again, and we have to like get back in it and stuff. So I had actually seen on Facebook on a homeschooling group where someone was saying that their 10-year-old was having a hard time falling asleep. And this is a kind of common thing in the preteen, teenage years, where their circadian rhythm shifts.
Exactly.
And, it starts to be difficult for them to fall asleep. So I was like recommending, just you got to work with them.
You do, yes.
You can't help it, But then someone else had commented when they're like, why are you waking your kids up in the morning? Like, why do you even homeschool? And I thought, well, I do wake my kids up sometimes in the morning, because the things that we do that are also valuable to us, like our co-op or our church and things like that, or we have animals that they need to be let outside in the morning. You can't sleep until noon. So
there are some priorities here. Yes, exactly.
So that goes back to the priorities. Like you have your priorities, but you can still be flexible. Like I don't wake my kids up at dawn, and sometimes if they've had a late night, I might let them sleep in a little bit longer. Whereas
that goes back to that flexibility. Yes, and you do have the a lot of times, and it's sometimes just not fruitful to try to teach a teenager at too early in the morning, because you're really just going to end up repeating yourself anyways. Been there, done that.
They do tend to learn better when you're more flexible, and in reality, that's kind of the world. Like you have to, if you work somewhere, because I've heard before, like, you have to get them used to waking up early and having this schedule. That's not how the world is anymore. Like,
no. And my kids were on this, like, we'll start school at noon schedule, and then they got real jobs and they were up at early in the morning. They learned to adapt because life demands it. And if they have a good internal sense of responsibility, That's what's most important. They will change their schedule if they know they're responsible for something at a certain time. And it very little effects. I know I felt that guilt too, and like, oh my goodness, I'm ruining my children. No. I've got 20-some-year-olds, and my youngest is 17. They all made that shift perfectly fine.
And I mean, that's just part of life, is having to adapt to different things. Like, you're probably not going to have, like, these days, most people don't have the same job their entire life. And different jobs have different times you have to start. There's night shift jobs. So you can even, if you find that a certain time works best for you, for your body, you have that ability to go and find a job that works for that. And I've even seen that there's a DNA test that will tell you what time is the best time for your body to wake up. I don't know if that changes like over the course of your life, because I know there are different like typical sleep patterns of different ages.
Right.
And I thought that was really interesting, because
that is interesting.
Biologically, like, we can't necessarily be a morning person. So if you're feeling it and you're like, man, getting up at 6 or 7 or even 8 in the morning is just like constantly difficult, it's okay to move it down an hour or whatever. Try something different. So, and you'll find like kids tend to learn better when they're awake.
Yeah, that is so true. I completely agree. Yes. So like, you say increased learning happens, and really more freedom.
So, and more freedom. And what I mean by that is, for instance, there are certain things that our church does that are in the evening. Some things are in the morning, some things are in the afternoon. And if they were in a public school, half of that we wouldn't be able to participate because our church is an hour away. So like,
so you got to build in that travel time.
Yeah, so we're like in this rural area, and there's, it's a lot of driving. So sometimes we get home at midnight or 1 in the morning, and the next day we're not hopping up at 8. So.
Right. Exactly.
And also for parents who work like me, or parents who like to travel, or they
like us,
their job. I saw one where a mom wanted to homeschool because she's a traveling nurse, and she wanted to be able to take her children with her. Military families, a lot of times. And just a lot of jobs require traveling. Maybe less nowadays because of all the restrictions and stuff.
Yeah,
but
I know when I travel and speak, my daughter comes with me, and it's so easy to just have her books, and she just does school while we're going. So,
I've taken books with me when I had to get the car's oil change, and instead of, because I was a single mom for a little while, and they came everywhere with me. I take their books. That was how I kept their behavior like calm.
When they're buckled in, it does help with that.
Well, I mean, we'd be sitting in like the
waiting area.
And the only thing that was challenging was there's usually a TV.
Don't
get a lot of TV, so when it'd be like the news, and my kids are like, oh, wow, the news. And I'm like, no, focus on your books. So.
But even, change of environment. I mean, even if you were to take the books to the park and things like that, it ignites something in the brain to want to learn more. And so those are great points.
Go on to the next slide.
Okay, so multidisciplinary.
So combining the subjects when you can.
Oh, yes. Yep, okay. I'm going to go back there.
You don't have to do every subject every day. That was major for me.
That is a good point. Yes. We used to do unit studies, and maybe half the year we would do history, the other half we would do science. And with kids on the spectrum, when they don't, shift topics too quickly, it was really good for us, because it helped us to focus on one subject instead of to have one extra or two extra things in the day that we didn't have to shift, because shifting takes so much energy.
Yeah, I have said we have like transition resistance here. Like
Yes, yes.
um,
Mm-hmm.
just trying to move from one thing to the next is really difficult unless you have. That's where the routine can come in and be helpful, where you have like, okay, this is the signal that we're going to be moving to the next thing.
That's a good, yes, I've
Um,
heard people that do that, yes.
so, and it doesn't have to be a huge thing. It could be something small. There's lots of different things. I would discourage using food as a signal of transition, because that
Mm-hmm.
can give way to like bad food eating habits.
Right. We use meal times sometimes, like
Yeah,
lunch. Lunch would be a
yes,
transition time.
yes.
And I did a lot of reading while my kids were sitting and eating, and I was reading.
Yeah, that would be a healthy one, but I mean
Yep.
like candy or
But,
something like
right, exactly.
that.
Yep,
So
yep.
I've seen people do that. Even I was surprised, like when my youngest, or my oldest rather, was in speech therapy when she was little.
Hmm.
They would give her a piece of candy like to leave, and I was like, "Why are you doing that?
Yes.
Don't you know that's bad for
Mm-hmm.
them?" So,
Mm-hmm.
um, but I mean, I would give them healthy snacks because it was a long drive. Again, another hour to get there, but
Right.
so they would eat in the car anyway. But they didn't need a
Mm-hmm.
piece of candy.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
they could have something healthy. I do encourage my kids, like, they can eat a cucumber or some celery or some carrots, like to
Mm-hmm.
have that tactile, sensory thing that they sometimes
Right.
want, and it's into something healthy. It's not a cookie or something
Mm-hmm.
like that. So,
Yeah.
um,
Those are some great suggestions. Love that. And then prioritize,
amazing.
don't overplan. What else do you have to add to that one? I
Um,
loved what you already talked about.
the big thing that I wanted to add to that was the concept of eating the frog in the morning, which is
Ah, yes.
this
do
idea
go
that
into that.
you do the things you don't want to do first.
Hmm.
You do the low dopamine things, the things that aren't exciting. Um, my kids, I actually don't let them eat breakfast until they've taken care of the animals. Doesn't take them very
We used
long.
to do that too when we lived on a farm. Hmm.
Yeah, because why should you be eating when the animals didn't get to eat yet and they
Hmm.
have to wait for you? And
Right.
also, I have found very consistently, once they eat breakfast, they do not want to move. They don't want to do anything, which is
Uh-huh.
natural because your body's digesting. So,
Right, exactly. It's
you
using
know,
that energy. Hmm.
yeah. So,
Yep.
and that's fine and that's normal.
Hmm.
But you just have to make sure you're putting things in that order, the proper
Right.
order of things. So it's also good to just have like the fun things, do the fun things last. Because
Mm-hmm.
once you've done something fun, you don't want to do something hard or something boring after that.
Yes.
Um,
Yep.
so that goes for screen time. That's a big one.
Mm-hmm.
My kids don't get, like, some days they don't get any screen time at all, and that's okay too. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, because that's a very, very high dopamine activity. You get a
Right.
lot of dopamine from looking at a screen. Even
Mm-hmm.
something boring like the news is still very high dopamine. And
Right. It's a great point.
so they have to do their schoolwork first. If every once in a while I'll let them watch a movie or something, like in the evening, if everything else is done. The house is clean, the like just everything. Or their schoolwork's done, they've been behaving, it's like a reward. So but yeah, that's
Hmm.
been really and that's for me too. Like I can't uh I feel like I can't function well if I do like if I eat candy in the morning, then I don't want to do anything all day. It makes me just like sluggish. So
Yep.
you have sugar crashes and all that stuff involved. So
Mm-hmm. So
um,
we have a question from a viewer that's kind of related to this. I'm going to put it up on the screen. But Jennifer is watching on YouTube. Asked, I'll be working 5 days a week on site and be ready to homeschool at 3:30. But he's not homeschooled early, and then he's overstimulated by a late day. I didn't get the rest of it, but probably how can she homeschool? I can't see the rest of them. I'm having some trouble with some of our questions, but so how would you address that? Working yourself, the schedule is going to dictate that maybe her son is going to be doing school during some of that time. What are some things that she can do?
That's something that happens in our house a lot. 3:30 is about when I'm finishing up most of my work, and I have found, one, you want to make sure that while you're working, they're not watching TV and doing stuff like that, which is hard because you're not there, but you can tell, like, whoever's watching them, like, they can't eat a bunch of sugar, which they shouldn't be doing anyway.
Right.
That's just, for anybody. And then, you don't really want them having screen time until after they've done their schoolwork. If they can do something physical during that time, because usually I tell my kids, go do your chores while I'm working, and then they can read, or even just look at books for my littler ones, and they can do things that aren't as stimulating until that time. And also, like, if I don't know what their setup is, like if they are taking their child to like a daycare, or if they're watched at home, but if they're being watched at home, like, don't wake them up, just let them sleep longer. That's a shorter amount of time, and then they won't be so overtired when you get home. 3:30 is a hard time to start doing school because naturally most of our bodies are getting tired at that time. So you have to be extra patient and just understand, like, you're going to be tired because you just worked all day.
Right.
It's going to be tired. I like to do the exercises, our brain integration exercises first, because it gets your blood flowing and stuff.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And their brain working. It's like a warm-up for us, so that helps us a lot as well. So those are some of the tips I would say for that.
Yeah, yep. And then we had just a couple other comments. Pug Life said, "Thank you for letting me know that starting a school day at 11 a.m. doesn't set my child up for a poor work ethic." That is, it is true. Just believe us. And she said, "My big plan is, of course, maintaining a real job someday, as we want for all our kids. Nature walks, drawing, silent reading, pre-learning worksheets. Those are all great for getting that brain going." And so, I know we're about down to 8 minutes, and I want to make sure we get through the rest of your content. So should I go on to the next slide? Okay, and then taking breaks.
This one's pretty simple. You take breaks because, your brain needs a break. And if you can get them to do something active during their break, that's great. But maybe your kid just needs, like, to do deep breathing or something like that to calm down. It depends how the child is. I know sometimes we do like a higher energy thing and then a lower energy thing, and then we go back into our schoolwork. So
that's great. Yeah. Good suggestions. Yeah, and they say that after some physical activity that the brain actually will focus better, and for little kids, we try to give them 20-minute assignments. Their brain focuses for about 5. so don't push it.
And attention is a learned skill. I think a lot of people don't realize that. Like, they feel like, oh no, my 5-year-old can only pay attention for like 4 or 5 minutes. That's normal.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. Yes, that is so true.
So don't jump the gun and think there's like attention problems right off the bat. Sometimes it's just developmentally normal. They usually say about 1 minute per year old they are is how long their attention is. So for an adult, max is 45 minutes. Like, that's the maximum you get. And most of the time we do our lessons are like an hour. So it's like, why are we doing it like this? So I like to do it with my kids together. That's on the next slide, actually.
Okay. Yep.
With the strategies for how to get it done faster. Because a big part of like your scheduling is, well, your goal is to get it done. And
right. Exactly.
The faster you can get it done, and effectively done, then the better. So I am always a big proponent of having siblings helping.
Yes.
Because and I originally had said older kids can help, but then I said no. Sometimes the younger kids are helping older kids. Sometimes it's reversed, especially when you have your older kids struggling. And sometimes even your older struggling kids can still help younger kids. So it's just, it could be, you don't even know how it's going to play out until it's happening.
Right. Well, and as you study your kids, you know their strengths.
Yeah.
And you know one's strengths and one's weakness and how you compare them up to help each other. And it's good for them to understand that, you know, we all struggle and we all have strengths, and this is how we can work together better.
Yeah. So, and sometimes siblings clash and it doesn't work.
Exactly. Or you teach them to be better friends through the the chaos.
You know, you do what works for you. And also, always, like this quote here, it says, the greatest gifts you can give your children are the roots of responsibility and the wings of independence. And really, that's our goal as parents, is to raise our kids not to be kids, but to be productive adults.
Exactly.
And so teaching them independence, especially in their schoolwork, it's going to make it easier for you. It's going to make it easier for them. So even with my kids at preschool level, they're following along as I read the directions. And I always am saying, read the directions first. So they get in the habit of reading the directions. And even now, my 10-year-old, she knows she's got to read now that she can actually read. She did actually learn how to read. And despite my fears that it would never happen.
That would
never. And she just learned a little bit later, but and she's not necessarily the strongest reader, but she can read, and she reads the directions first. And I'm like, yes,
that's awesome.
She's reading directions.
Yeah. And it's amazing just how, you know, you think you're just repeating yourself, and all of a sudden it becomes, and you are, but all of a sudden your kids go, oh, this is the way we do things. And then all of a sudden one day you just find you're not repeating yourself anymore. And you're like, oh, we're getting this. There's always something new, but, you know, the thing that you had been saying over and over again does get integrated. And,
Start by giving them small tasks that they can do successfully by themselves. So that could be copy work, which I never wanted my kids to do copy work because I thought how boring. But then I realized they need that because their handwriting is horrible, and they just needed that extra practice. And,
working on those muscles, and
they need to work those muscles. And you know, so you can also have them work independently on something that they can do while you work more closely with another kid. And it kind of forces them to be like, okay, I do have to do some of this by myself. So, and my kids get super excited now when they can do things. Like at first it was like pulling teeth. They're like, no, we want you to help. But now they're like, look, I can do it by myself. So,
oh, yes. And that's a sense of accomplishment. We want them to feel that and know they can do that. Definitely. Awesome. All right. And then you got a few quotes here.
About being flexible. Blessed are the flexible, for they will not be bent out of shape, which is kind of cool, right?
That's great. I love that.
You know, it can be stressful to be inflexible.
Yes.
And this one says, be stubborn about your goals and flexible about your methods. So we all have this goal of raising productive adults, but we have to be flexible about how we go about it.
Yeah.
And if plan A didn't work, the alphabet has 25 more ahead. They stay there's always it's tempting to just give up and be frustrated and say there's no other way to do this. There's infinite ways to
exactly.
So
yes, so true. I love that. And then people can connect with you at
Pillars of Peace primarypartners.com. So we are a homeschool hybrid. We do everything online. We do the brain integration therapy exercises, and also use some specific strategies to help the struggling learners and just help the kids feel more accountable to listen to their parents.
Yeah. Yep.
So.
Yeah, well, and it's great to just, as a parent, especially, if you feel like you need that extra support, don't feel down on yourself. It's okay. There are resources out there. That's why we exist, to help you find them. And we're excited about Alona's new endeavor, because this is something we haven't seen before, and I know it's something that a lot of families could use. This virtual hybrid approach to just helping you with that flexibility, yet the routine that you need, and some help alongside with just helping to teach your kids. So that's exciting. So definitely check out her website at Pillars of Peace Primary Partners. And Alona, thank you so much for all you've had to share. This has been such a fun hour. We've had lots of comments and along the way, and I'm thinking I missed some, because I can't even scroll down on my feed right now and to see if I missed anything. I super apologize if I did not respond to your to anything that you commented on, and so hopefully we'll be able to work that out. But like I said, I'm traveling too, and that might be part of the issue. But anyways, we will hope that we've encouraged you and helped you to see that how many just different things that you have the ability to do with your schedule. So thank you so much, Alona, for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know it's a lot, working and teaching your own kids. You're running your own business, and but thank you for being encouragement to our community today, and just for the work that you're doing. I appreciate it so much.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, definitely. I want to appreciate it, and I just want all of you to check out her website too, and see if that might be a good fit for your family, if you're kind of thinking about what might be coming up in the next year. And Pug's Life said thank you. I'm seeing that comment. So, but yeah, so this is our last broadcast this month, where we're focusing on school choice. Next month, we're going to be focusing on medical issues, and we're going to dive into a plethora of medical issues all at the same time. My guest that'll be on next week is Terry McKee, and she not only has kids with medical issues, but a husband with medical issues, and herself as well, and just how she navigates homeschooling. We're just going to be sharing some stories, some personal insight on how to do that. And I know we deal with illnesses, sometimes maybe more long-term chronic, and with all the things going on in our world, we deal with a lot of illnesses that are short-term too. So definitely want to join us, and we'll be on at the same time next week. Samuel gave you a thumbs up, Alona. So but yeah, so join us next week, same time, same place. We'll be here on Facebook and YouTube as well, and we hope to see you then. So thanks everybody, and check out our website again at spedhomeschool.com, and that's where and also Alona's website as well. And we'll see you next week right here on Empowering Homeschool Conversations. Bye everybody.